He's going to be here. Okay.
We're not going to wait for it. Okay. So we did pull it together. We're a minute late. It is Saturday, the 2nd of November. It's time to get the budget hearing started. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk Brady, roll call.
Trustee Vogel?
Here.
Trustee Papantos?
Present.
Trustee Vito?
Here.
Trustee Lang will be here in a few minutes. Trustee Kruger? Trustee Rufato is absent with prior notice, and President Horton.
Right here. Citizen concerns and comments?
Not today.
Not today. I think there should be, shouldn't there? Citizen concerns and comments? Yeah. On the agenda, yes, but if he's here, that's okay. Oh, none.
None. Oh, I'm sorry. None. I'm sorry.
Pretty sure they're supposed to be at every one of them.
Yes, yes, you are correct.
Main reason, Clerk Brady, what are we here for? Item 5? We're here to discuss the 2025 budget for the Village of Wheeling.
Oh.
Mr. Svandelis.
Good morning. We're here to discuss the FY.
We'll pull it together in just a few minutes. It's early.
You know what? Everyone's just so excited to talk about what a good year we are having and how good things look, so it's okay. So good morning, everyone. Want to begin by thanking you all for being here and watching if you are at home. I always like to begin with a thank you to the people that make it happen. So I'd like to acknowledge and thank staff for their hard work, not only in the preparation of the budget document itself, but through the work that happens all year long in order to keep this document appropriately balanced, working within the confines of it, but also providing exemplary service. And that is not just the people at the dais over here at the staff table, but that is every member of every department. It certainly is a team effort in order to present such good news. I also want to acknowledge and thank the board for their leadership and perhaps most importantly, their consistency through the good years and the bad, making the difficult decisions that allow us to have the financial foundation to provide these services to our residents and businesses. So thank you very much. Similar to years past, we'll present the current and projected financial position of the village through a few major categories, beginning with the economy and its impact, projections for the future, and we will end this morning with some discussions and choices to be made. Today's conversation is about the big picture. It's about where is the village in totality with its financial position. That said, this is also an opportunity to discuss if there are any questions, but also make sure that the public is aware that all the details have already been discussed. This is not the beginning of the process, this is the end of the process. So the budget book has many pages to it. It incorporates all of the operating funds that provide us the ability to do our jobs, and all of those pages have been reviewed by an elected official here through our liaison program, where each department is assigned an elected official, and they are given the opportunity to meet with their respective department head and go through the details line by line if they'd like, or ask and have any questions they have answered by the department head to ensure that the operating budget is appropriate. So those meetings have happened. Also, I have met with each trustee along with Finance Director Smith to discuss, again, the big picture of what we're going to talk about today, but also provide the opportunity to answer any specific questions they may have. So while today we are focusing on the big picture, please know that this document has been reviewed thoroughly. Today's schedule, much like in years past, Director Smith will present an overview of the village's current and projected financial position, and then I will ask for direction on a number of items at the end, including a review of all the pink sheets, a process we can explain a little bit later on when we get to it. This has been a great year for the Village of Wheeling. It is, I would call it a banner year, in fact, but I'm also happy that it's not an anomaly. We have had a number of very good years. This is the 8 out of 9 of the last years have had a surplus budget. We continue to allocate money toward our balloon payments. We are on schedule to be debt-free by 2030. Again this year, we are not presenting a tax levy increase. There is an asterisk to that statement, which we will discuss in more detail, but there is no levy increase that will have any impact on residents or businesses. The general fund budget remains status quo, but that does not mean that it's stagnant. Overall, we are continued to our commitment to fiscal responsibility by managing our expenditures and not adding to them. You will note as you look through the operating budget that, but for inflation, there is very little growth within the departments themselves. And that, to me, is a reflection of the professionalism of our department heads and their staff in order to get the same amount of work done without having to go back to the well for more money. Our reserves are healthy at over 41%, and we continue to fully fund our SURF program, which is our capital equipment replacement fund, which is a major accomplishment because it is putting money away today for the purchase of equipment in the future. That is incredibly responsible, but during difficult times, it's also a challenging decision to make from the policymakers here, so we thank you for that. The budget maintains core services with no new personnel or added programs, but continues to provide superior core services and over $21 million in capital improvements for the year. With that, I will introduce Director Smith to give us our overview of 2025 and beyond. Director Smith.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Back in the back? Okay, great. Welcome. Thank you for coming this morning. The 2025 proposed budget, if you're at home and you want to follow along or you want to dig more into the budget, you can go to www.wheelingil.gov and you can click on Transparency, Budget Information, and then the 2025 proposed annual operating budget. We'll start, as we usually do, with a discussion on the economy. This is the Consumer Price Index for the last 10 years. It measures the average change in price over time of a market basket of consumer goods and services. We show this slide to show this year that falling inflation rates can affect sales and income tax growth in the future. So as this declines, we'll see a dip in sales and income tax potentially. These are the U.S. unemployment numbers, as well as the Wheeling numbers. They've ticked up from 3.3% at the end of 2023 to 3.9%. That's common when the inflation is going down to see an uptick in unemployment. As long as we don't grow further as a nation here, up through 5-6%, the economy will still be strong. Low unemployment leads to more income tax revenue for the village, so we want those numbers to stay low. This is the real GDP. It's an indicator of growth in the economy. 2 to 3% is normally considered good, and as you can see from the last few years, we've had steady growth. This year's a little bit lower than last year as the economy contracts a little bit, but we're expecting modest growth in 2025 as well. So maybe under 2%, but still growth next year, which is good for the village. Consumer spending strong consumer demand leads to more sales tax revenue. So if these percents are high, that's good for the village and the general fund revenue. This year so far, we're a little bit higher than last year, which was not expected coming into this year, but consumers are continuing to spend despite record credit card debt in the nation. So as the economy continues to contract, we may see these numbers go down because consumers are kind of at their limits at the moment, especially in the lower half of our economy. This is the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index. This is based on 500 telephone calls that are made to consumers to judge their attitudes on business climate and personal finance. As we hit the pandemic in 2020, the outlook was not good, but the last few years, as income has caught up to inflation for a majority of our population, the sentiment has been greater. And people are still positive as the worry of a recession has dropped over the last year. So as long as that doesn't happen, I think consumers will be feeling good about the economy. This is the 10-year Treasury rate. The higher the Treasury rate, the better interest earnings are generally for the village. The yield curve was inverted from June 2022 until September of this year. It finally went back, and what that means is the 2-year Treasury rate, when the curve's inverted, the 2-year Treasury rate is greater than the 10-year, which is unusual and not necessarily great for the economy. Now that it's back to normal, you can see that the 10-year is greater than the 2. It's ticking up, which is unusual, but that is because the market had built in more budget cut or more Fed reserve cuts to this fiscal year than actually happened. As you know, the Fed finally made its first cut at the beginning of September. It was a half point. They're expecting to do 2 more cuts this year, and about a whole basis point next year was on their dot plot that they released when they made the half point cut. So as a result, this rate went up a little bit because we were expecting more cuts. So because we had less, it went up. But it will start to fall as the cuts continue. Here's the S&P 500. You can see that it's done very well this year, over 19%. The only trouble with that is that a majority of that growth is from the Magnificent Seven stocks, your Apple, your NVIDIA, Tesla, the big technology stocks. So you'd like to see that growth spread out over all of the companies in the S&P 500, but it's good nonetheless. This is the Case-Shiller Chicago Home Price Index. This is the one area of the market that hasn't gotten a lot better since the economy started to improve. And that's because the cuts haven't really started to take effect yet. We've only had the one from September. As the cuts continue next year, hopefully people that have been in their homes that would like to move will be able to because the interest rates will fall down. But at the end of this year, economists are expecting a shortfall of 1 million single-family homes. The as-builts, the built homes are down and not meeting demand. So prices go up as a result. Now we can discuss the 2024 projected results. The board budgeted a $1.5 million surplus for 2024, and I'm still estimating a $1.5 million surplus. That would bring our fund balance up to about $21 million and 42% of next year's expenditures. The village has generally averaged between 38 and 40%, and I will discuss that a little bit more later. At the end of the year, we typically do some year-end transfers to cover capital costs and pension costs. So if we do that again this year, we'll drop down into that 38 to 40% range again. Talking about revenues, these are the the revenue highlights for the year, sales and income tax are both up. Sales tax, the economy's been strong, as we saw from the slides. So that's up about $500,000, and income tax is up because corporate profits and low unemployment. Those were offset by use tax, ambulance revenue, and intergovernmental agreements that the village had with Des Plaines for dispatching. That's going to go down because Des Plaines has opted out of the contract, and they are leaving at the end of November. So we will not have December revenue. So I'm going to show a shortfall there. Use tax is down. We're not really sure why IML and the Illinois Department of Revenue have been looking into it. It's a sorted affair there in use tax. There's a lot of factors, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly what the problem is. But next year, as of January 1st, 2025, there'll be an additional Level the Playing Field Act rules going into place that will move more use tax up into the sales tax line. So that'll be good for the village because we'll be getting more of that revenue from online sales. And then ambulance fees, it's sort of down, it's sort of not. Here's the story. At the beginning of the year, the ambulance billing company that we use was bought by another ambulance company. So for a month or two, there was a transition that occurred that slowed billing. That caught up by end of first quarter, second quarter of the fiscal year. But at the same time, the Ground Emergency Medical Transportation Program put in new rules, and everybody that was a part of that program had to submit additional paperwork, and the money stopped until you were accepted into the new program. We got our paperwork in right away, but we're still waiting for the money to start funneling to us again. So the good news is our billing numbers are higher than last year, about 12%, so the revenue's there. But since we record ambulance revenue as it's received, and we're still waiting for this GEMT money to come back to us, I'm showing a shortfall until I'm comfortable seeing those numbers come back to us. So although I'm saying that there's a $1.5 million surplus this year, if all of that revenue from ambulance comes back to us by the end of the year, rather than next year, we could have a $2 million surplus this year.
Excuse me, Director Smith, what are the expected changes to the Level the Playing Field Act?
I don't know what the exact changes are, but I know that they're just additional things that will roll up into sales tax.
Will that affect consumers?
No, no, I don't believe it will.
Or is it, so it's more accounting?
No, it's just additional things that, additional online payments that will get hit with the tax. So I guess it could affect users, but I don't really know the specifics. I haven't been able to find them anywhere.
Thank you.
Sorry.
And Brian, can I piggyback? On
Yeah.
that last slide, as Brian discussed the GEMT, where that looks like a troubling number, but really it isn't. I also want to add, and I know we're going to talk about dispatch a little bit later, but before anyone jumps to any conclusions, I want to add that although Des Plaines is leaving the Wheeling Dispatch Center, Wheeling is transitioning to the Northwest Central Dispatch System, where in the end, the village will be saving a significant amount of money. So again, while you see some negative numbers here, as those numbers become reality, there are other factors that play in, and in the balance, the village will be to the good when it comes to dispatch. So just, this is a negative picture here, but as we talk about dispatch, I wanted to jump to the end and say that we're actually going to be saving a significant amount of money.
That's correct, and yes, I do have those slides for later. This is the 10-year history of surpluses. As you can see, the village has done very well over the last 10 years, and then you can see an uptick there in 22 and 23 and 24. That's because, for 24, that's because it doesn't reflect any year-end transfers. The uptick there in 22 and 23 was to, we had to keep more surplus in those years to stay within the 38 to 40% range because expenditures had gone up, and we needed a little more in the coffers to stay in that area. And then this is the fund balance by year. We'll pass over the 20 million this year, like I mentioned earlier. And then this is a comparison of our fund balance policy to our surrounding communities. You can see that we're on the lower end with 25%, but we keep it above 35% because that's what the bond rating agencies are looking for to give a bond rating a AAA. So we'd like to think maybe we get there someday. So we keep our fund balance high to meet those standards. And then this is a comparison of fund balance by community. So, you know, if that sounds high to you at home. Here's where everybody kind of sits, and we're on the low end of that.
But can you go back? Can you go back just? There you
Yep.
go. But this is, I mean, the fund, probably over-explaining. The fund balance is our operating capital should everything stop,
Yes,
which means that all these other communities that have 104%, 108%, 67%, they have that much of their operating expenses in reserve should money stop coming in, period. I don't know how that would happen. But that means their residents are putting that money in there.
correct.
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
a balance between how safe you want to be versus do you need it?
Correct.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's why when we have those surpluses, we typically use them for something.
Pay
You
for
know,
bills that we have.
Pay the bills and plan for the future, which is something that the village has done very well over the last 10 years.
And $1 million
it
on
shows.
$1 million surplus on a $100 million budget, that's pretty tight.
Yes, yes. The margins are small.
Excellent.
And as you can see from that revenue slide I showed you, you know, $500,000 this way or that way can happen very easily in the major revenue sources. And so we have to plan very carefully.
Thank you.
Okay, now we can talk about the property tax levy. I'm going to start with our first special topic of the day. So while I'm not going to be asking for a tax levy this year, I am going to be asking for something else. The South Milwaukee TIF district expired at the end of last year, 2023. Now, in 2024, it received tax increment from the 2023 levy. But the board terminated the district by ordinance on September 16th, and Kleinthorpe and Jenkins helped me file the paperwork with the county to terminate the district, and that's been accepted now. So now that that's happened, the board has the option of capturing the growth that occurred in the TIF, rolling it into the main levy, increasing our property tax levy without increasing taxes on businesses and residents. And let me try to explain how that works. At the beginning of the TIF, when it was created in the year 2000, it had a base EAV of about 1.7 million. That money stayed in the normal village levy. So we were earning property tax money on that money in the main levy during that time. In the meantime, the rest of the EAV growth that occurred from the development done in the TIF earned additional property tax revenue that was paid to the TIF district. But that didn't increase anybody else's property taxes. It just increased the taxes on the developed properties. And now that the TIF is ended, that money can be moved into the main levy, and we can raise property taxes at the same rate as the EAV has increased to capture that growth. And in the end, we can raise the levy $236,000 this year without affecting taxes on residents and businesses.
I'd like to add that explanation is not just for the Village of Wheeling. It's for every taxing body on the property tax bill. In fact, we have a press release that is a joint press release between us and most of the taxing bodies explaining precisely this, so that the public is aware that this is capturing growth and trying to explain why this isn't going to impact their bottom line. But I just wanted to make sure it was clear that this isn't just the Village of Wheeling. The explanation that Brian just gave is applicable to every taxing body. That's just the way TIFs work. And if you look at the comparison between the beginning and ending EAVs, I think it's pretty clear that this was a successful TIF project, or successful TIF, period.
Yeah, and it's always, it's interesting to me to see that, you know, it's like a $17 million increase in EAV, but we're only getting 236,000 out of it. So that's how successful you have to be to make something off of that deal.
And you can calculate the other taxing bodies just by understanding their percentage of the tax bill. So they're going to be receiving significantly more.
This is the famous three-legged stool slide. It's important because it shows, well, it reiterates how these taxes are distributed to the public or to the municipalities. And it also shows that while these three main sources of revenue are unequal both in the amount that they generate and in how much control we have over them. So I'm going to go through quickly, but for sales tax revenue, we're projecting 12.6 million next year. And the only way we can control that number or make it grow is by economic development or through business recruitment through the Economic Development Department. Income tax, we have very little control over. It's distributed per capita. So while all Wheeling residents will pay income tax, we don't receive that money directly. All of the income tax from the entire state goes into one big pool, and then it's distributed by population. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the U.S. Census is what determines your population. So the last time we had a U.S. Census was 2020, so we've been operating off of those numbers for the last 4 years, and we'll be operating on them until the 2030 census. But for the potential of a special census, if we have significant growth in the village during that time, we can request a special census, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah, please highlight that in your mind, because we're going to come back to that a little later in the presentation.
For 2025, we're projecting 6.9 million for income tax. And then you have property tax, which is the one source of revenue that we do have control over. And anytime our revenues are short of expenditures, that's where we typically look, right? Because as a home rule community, we can increase our property tax levy above PTEL. Anything we need to do, we can do, but we have to be shepherds of that rate and do our best to keep it. Only
Above
increase
what?
it when we need it.
Above what? PTEL.
Oh, PTEL. So if you're not a home rule community, you are subject to PTEL, and you can only increase your property tax
PTEL
levy.
is
Oh, you want the words.
jargon, please.
I don't know if I have them written down here.
Okay,
Oh,
then.
it's the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law.
Okay, there we go.
So if you're not a home rule, you can only raise your property tax the lesser of prior year CPI or 5%. So CPI has been high, so PTEL has been 5% the last few years, and we'll talk about that more in the next few slides.
Which is also the rule that the other taxing bodies have to follow.
Yes.
So when they talk about increases to their rates, that's the formula that they're working against.
This is the share of the tax bill. So the village's rate, or share of the rate, fell this year from 12.69 to 12.22. And it has actually fallen from 13.89% in 2019. So we've been falling steadily. And the reason is our sales and income tax numbers have been better over the last few years. They've been rising, so we have not had property tax increases, while the other districts who do not receive sales and income tax have been have been using the property tax increases to cover their ground. And since PTEL has been high, they've been taking advantage, and you can see their averages from 2019 to 2023 were close to 5%, while ours, with our sales and income tax number growing, averaged only 0.95% during that time.
This is a very important slide, not just because it provides the comparison, but also when we talk about economic development and economic growth within the village, we're still limited to somewhat of a small margin, because we talk about all the new restaurants that have opened, which are great and provide us food and beverage sales tax, But the windfall really comes from the Level the Playing Field Act, which was instituted a couple years ago. And that's where the village is really seeing the life preserver against having to raise our tax levies. But that is leveling out. So as we talk about, and Brian has projections for future years, as much success as we're having, and we are, and that's very important for the community, to continue to bring in these restaurants and businesses so that we have a place that people want to live and do business. But financially, we're not getting a substantial amount of money as a result of those businesses. It really is Level the Playing Field that is bringing in the lion's share of revenue for us. And as that levels out and expenses continue to rise, that's what we are up against every year when we prepare the budget.
Director Smith,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Yes.
Going back, we talked about ambulance fees, and I think we're going more from a three-legged stool to a four-legged stool. It seems to be a significant portion of our budget that,
Yeah, we've budgeted about 3.7 million of ambulance fee revenue in 2025, so it's getting there. It's certainly the next highest revenue source. We'll be watching it closely because there are some communities that are raising their costs their fees to equal their GEMT rate. That is the entire fire department budget divided by the number of calls. And that would raise our rates. If we were to do that, it would double our rates. So then you'd really be talking about a fourth leg at that time. That's not something we're comfortable presenting to the board right now. I think we need to watch it and see what other communities are doing and get our feet in when the water's warm. But that's something that could be an option in the next year or two.
And Brian, before that becomes clickbait, the doubling of the expense, which we are not considering at the moment, but that expense is paid by insurance, not the resident,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So before that becomes panic, even if we affected our rates, we're not looking at a direct impact to the resident. It's just sort of capturing the growth or maybe the opportunity of what the insurance pay. So,
Are we getting residents or folks that are refusing ambulance services because of that fee?
I don't think so.
No, and we don't balance bill either, so if their insurance doesn't cover it, or they cover it. No, that has not happened, and we also don't balance bill, so if their insurance only covers 1,000 of it, we don't balance bill for the rest. So there would be no additional out-of-pocket expenses for the residents.
Microphone in his mouth.
Okay. This is the breakdown of taxes collected by district. So as you can see, while we're 12% of the rate, we like to show this slide because you're getting a lot of bang for your buck in the village of Wheeling. You're getting your fire and police and public works services, but we are on the lower end of the money collected within the district. And then this is our 10-year property tax history. In 2025, we raised the levy up to 14 million to cover a shortfall that had been building for a long time. But since then, we've been very conservative in our approach to the property tax levy. You can see 2020 was the year that our revenues dipped significantly from COVID. Since then, sales and income tax have skyrocketed from from inflation and from the Level of the Playing Field Act. And as a result, 4 out of the last 5 years, we have not needed property tax levy increases. One caveat to that is that in 2019, we brought the new growth of the Crossroads TIF district that expired in. That would have been an additional 2.75% that's not shown here because it did not affect business owners and property owners. And same with 2024. If we were to take the 1.33% suggested earlier, that would be on top of the zero listed here. But again, wouldn't affect businesses and property owners.
Brian, that last bullet point, I think is good for everybody just to have a little perspective. the 1% levy increase is equal to $172,000. So just as we talk about anything related to the budget, I just think that's a good thing for everybody to keep in mind, that the value of a 1% levy increase is $172,000. Certainly that's going to become critical when we talk about the grocery tax.
This is the 5-year projection that I put together. Looks pretty good. As you can see, the 5th year always looks a little rough. That's the model. Expenditures increase at a specific rate that I put in, and they tend to outgrow revenues by the 5th year. It's something we keep an eye on, but I'm not concerned about at this time. These numbers do include 3% annual increases in the out years, 26 through 29. And it also includes capturing a third TIF that's going to expire in 2027, the North TIF, which is a larger TIF. And the initial projection I have right now, based on our current EAV numbers, is a 3.1% property tax increase to capture that growth in 2027. So the board will want to be mindful in the next few years, if we do need property tax increases, we might want to shuffle around that fiscal year to stay under 5%, you know, to help residents take that burden on over time if they need to.
That's a scary slide, but please remember that every year, when you do your projections, it almost always looks like the need for a levy increase is back up for discussion, which is not to say that this can go away the way it has in years past, but hopefully this slide is not as scary as it's presented. And as you say at the bottom, you know, the economy really is going to dictate where this slide takes us. But it is normal to show a deficit as we move out beyond 2 years. So just
yeah, and I have a few more
relieve
slides
everybody's
we'll
panic.
show shortly to help compare that against prior years. And then I just wanted to show this. If we go back to the property tax slide for a second. Oops, sorry, I missed it. Where was it? There it is. You can see that from 2015 to 2019, we needed large increases, and from 2020 on, we did not. And that's because from 2015 to 2019, revenues actually went down slightly. So during that time, we needed 30% property tax increase to cover the gap of rising expenditures. But then when you look at 21 versus 24, you can see that sales, income tax, and ambulance fees went up considerably. And as a result, we needed very little property tax increase during that time to cover the expenditures. And I just think it's crazy that in 3 years, those revenue sources went up almost $9 million. It's a lot of money. Now we can talk about the 2025 proposed budget a little bit. Including the 1.33% increase to capture the South TIF, I'm showing a surplus of $1.1 million for next year. That would take fund balance over $22 million and 43% of the next fiscal year's expenditures. That's not including any year-end transfers for 24 or 25. Okay, so this is the slide I just showed you, my current 5-year projection. And on the bottom, you'll see last year's 5-year projection. And as you can see, this year's looks a little worse than last year's, but the trends are very similar. I just wanted to show it to you because last year we used 2.25% property tax increases in the out years, and this year I used 3%. And I also included the North TIF growth, and the numbers look not quite as good still. So that's just to say that we are getting closer to a time that we may need property tax increases again. But I still don't think we need one this year. One of the reasons we want to be mindful of those gaps, though, is because of rising capital improvement costs. while inflation was very good for the general fund because it boosted the revenue numbers, it was not good for capital construction costs. In addition, the village has changed its outlook on capital costs. Under Director Kaup, we now follow a 23-year life cycle for roadway improvements. And what that means is we have completely new roads every 23 years over time.
What was it before? If it's 23 now, was it longer before, or?
I don't know that we were following one, but go ahead, Dan.
A lot of the ages of the roads, when they were replaced, were quite varied. So some of the roads, we would only get 14 or 15 years out of. Some of them, and we still do, get closer to 30. So we're replacing some roads that have lasted a long time. Other ones have not. So we're trying to inject different types of maintenance technologies to ensure that we can have a more stable life cycle by way of number of years that it lasts, but also to improve, to increase the number of years between our replacements, but keep the level of service at a high level.
Thank you.
We have not previously had a formalized policy for any of our asset management prior to the last couple of years. So, I mean, that goes for streets, water mains, as we discussed a couple of months ago at the board level, and we're going to bring up again in a few slides. But all of that is to regulate both the expectation of expenses and the experience of the user, right? So they know that they're going to have quality streets, they're going to have running water, sewer, all that.
So these numbers are a little higher than we were replacing at before. So we're just spending a little more. But as you can see from the bottom left there, it's also very consistent under this methodology. So we're spending about $21 million a year right now on capital. But we're getting a little less for our money. Street costs have gone up 38% since 2019, as you can see from that slide. And you can see the length of mileage go down over those years. And that's because, you know, you're getting a little less for those amounts. And then water main costs have almost doubled since 2021. So we're getting a lot less for our money there right now. So those costs tend to go up and go down over the years. So, you know, hopefully those will start to go down a little and we'll be able to replace more. This is a list of the main CIP projects for 2025. We're again looking to spend about $21 million. The highlights are probably the South Dunhurst Storm Sewer Project, which is the last major project of the Stormwater Management Plan, the water main loop, the Normal Street and water main replacements, and a storm sewer mapping or a new stormwater management plan that we'll be doing in 2025. And we'll also be replacing the parking lot out back, which is good. Okay, now I want to talk about the second special topic we have for the day, and that's the local grocery tax that Governor Pritzker proposed in his 2025 budget, repealing the statewide grocery tax as of January 1st, 2026. So just keep in mind this is a 2026 topic, not a 2025 topic. The General Assembly then gave municipalities the authority to implement a 1% local grocery tax, which would work like our food and beverage tax or our amusement tax. And most municipalities in the area are planning to implement this tax. And we'll get into a little bit about why. The village receives about $670,000 annually in grocery tax. That is equal to about a 3.9% property tax increase if it was to go away and we were looking to replace it. Another option, which is not a very good one, is to increase the home rule sales tax, 0.25%. Now, our sales tax is relatively high, it's at 10%. It's not really a great idea to increase that because it's a detraction to, businesses don't want to come into town if we have a large sales tax, they'll seek another town. And also the amount of revenue that would bring in is more than the grocery tax, so it's not an apples for apples decision. Not passing a local grocery tax would put added pressure on the property tax levy and the 5-year forecast. So this is something that the board will want to consider over the next few months and over the next year.
So there's a lot of debate about the grocery tax. Most of that is really just politics. The bottom line is there exists currently, it's going away at the state level, a 1% tax on groceries that is passed through to the municipalities. For Wheeling, that's $670,000. The state eliminated that, which puts all municipalities, but we only care about Wheeling, in a bit of a pickle here. I don't know how any municipality, I don't know how Wheeling could absorb a $670,000 loss. Thankfully, the state lawmakers allowed us, even non-home rule communities, to reinstate the tax. And it does seem like almost all, 99% of all municipalities are going to, because I don't know how any municipality can lose that much money. If you look at the percent, 4% tax levy increase is huge. It is a pass-on. The tax expires on January 1st, 2026. So municipalities have the opportunity, beginning now through all of '25, to pass an ordinance that reinstates the tax, so that when and if a municipality does reinstate, there is no change to the shoppers. Remember that a tax on groceries is not necessarily a tax on your residence. I think that's an important consideration when you weigh that against its value, meaning if we don't pass along the 1% tax, you have to pass a 4% tax levy to capture that money back. Well, that is clearly a tax on your residents and businesses, whereas a grocery tax is a tax on anybody who shops in town. So while it's probably, obviously, a majority of Wheeling residents, it's not solely Wheeling residents. So just things to consider, that there's a lot of politics involved, but none of that matters. What does matter is there's a law that eliminates for the Village of Wheeling $670,000, and there's a law that allows the Village of Wheeling to recapture that $670,000.
John, is the state still going to be the collection agency for it? And
Yes.
just remit it back to us?
Yes.
So we don't have to get involved in it?
Correct.
Good.
Without a fee.
And just to emphasize, for the consumers, it's a wash. They've been paying it, they're still going to pay it. Nobody's going to say, wait a minute, all of a sudden my grocery bill went up. It's going to stay exactly the same.
Correct. It is not an addition, and that's part of the debate, or perhaps misunderstanding, is that it's an additional 1%, and it's not. It's just nothing would, for the communities that pass the ordinance, it's neutral. Everything stays the same.
Thank you.
And then this is what the 5-year looks without the grocery tax. So basically, it's the same slide we've already seen, with $670,000 less in every year from 2026 on. So in the previous slide, you saw that 2026 had a $1.6 million surplus in it. That's now under $1 million. And then from 27 through 29, it does not look very good. It's flat for 27 and 28, which is okay, but there's a huge gap to be made up in 29 as a result. So that would be a problem, and I probably, if this was my 5-year forecast, I'd be asking for a property tax increase this year. So I'm thankful that this isn't what we're looking at. This is a list of the 7 expanded level requests that are in the budget as it stands right now, including, with the $1.1 million surplus. We're going to go through these line by line at the end. So I will not discuss them here right now. And I have the slide at the end as well, so we can pull it up.
Coffee
Schedule
time?
a 5-minute break for right now. If you want to take it, it's up to you guys.
I'm getting some nods off here on the left. Where's my cheat sheet? Need a motion for a recess. Let's call it a 10-minute recess at 9:21 here. Motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion Papantos, second Kruger. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
That's such enthusiasm.
Aye.
Recess. In deference to the authority of Mike Crotty, since he's going to retire next year anyhow, I'd like to call the meeting back to order.
So I'm saying, go ahead, I'll take it.
And unfair.
Did you find the elephant that was trumpeting off on your side of the room just a few minutes ago? Good, okay. There you go. Somebody throw the elephant out.
Yeah, you know, I was dreaming.
All right, I've got my coffee, I've got my donuts, and I've had a little chat. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Motion?
So moved.
Kruger, second.
Second?
Papantos? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Smith, you're up again.
Thank you. Wanted to talk a little bit about the liability insurance fund. The village has been self-insured for property casualty and workers' comp claims since the year 2000. And staff, prior to yesterday, I ended up talking to our insurance claim provider yesterday. And prior to that conversation, we were expecting about a 6% increase in premiums for next year. That estimate was before the hurricanes, which I thought would affect this year's rates. It turns out they won't affect them until the next fiscal year. So I'm going to bypass that for this year, but it will raise rates next year.
We had a lot of hurricanes here?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
I'm going to piggyback on that. You know, we were just having a conversation about all of these increases that are happening external to the village of Wheeling, and how much effort and how remarkable it is to be able to continue providing a balanced budget. I mean, a 6% increase, you know, $59,000, $60,000 in this case is fine, but we talked about increases to capital costs. All of these significant increases every year, year after year, and we really should pat ourselves on the back for being able to continue to provide a balanced budget without a levy increase. And I know that's a little self-serving here, but I do think that point gets lost, that all of these expenses continue to go up in large percentage numbers, and yet we are keeping our largest source of revenue, property tax, flat. That's a big deal. And I think it has become expected by the public that the answer is always zero, but that's a little unattainable, at least in the long run. And while we can still do it, there really should be a parade or something. Because this is a very big deal that we should all be very proud of as we continue to see slide after slide after slide of increases that total millions of dollars. So I'm sorry for you know, again,
No
patting
parade,
ourselves on the
though.
back.
No
but
parade, though, because we'd have to raise property
That's
taxes.
true. That's true. We have to pay for those.
Yep.
That's true.
Gonna cost something.
So the increases this year are due to property coverage. So we have the new fire station, so that's an added coverage expense. And then the powers that be changed their property valuations to not include some of the floodplain work that we've done, like we did for the fire station and the Public Works building. They take that out of the equation and raise the rates on us. So anyway, after the conversation I had yesterday, it looks more like 8%, which isn't too bad. I thought it would go up over 10. So this is our 10-year claim history. As long as we have 6 out of 10 good years, we usually do okay with the increases in the rates. We still are showing 6 out of 10 good years, but the last 3 were not great due to workers' comp claims that we had. So we do need to kind of get a few more good years in there the next few years, otherwise our rates will increase further. It's the Water and Sewer Fund. Back in April, Director Kaup came to you with an in-house water study that the Public Works Department did with a little help from Finance. And we asked you to do a 3.5, our normal 3.5 increase plus an additional 3% to help start to cover those additional water capital costs. So the rates have gone up, we're trying to do a little bit more work, so we need a little bit more money to do that. That said, a 6.5% increase is a 60-cent increase, and it will average about $6 per bill for the normal resident. So that's $36 a year that we're asking for, which is not too bad. This is
Director Smith,
Yes.
just go back to that one. Once we're for next year with the 6.5% increase, the following year, we will be back to our normal.
That's correct, right back down to normal.
Right.
And I'll touch on that a little bit more in a second. This is our water sales by year. Last year, we had a slight uptick in commercial and residential water usage. I'm not 100% sure why, but this year, we're projecting right in that billion gallons again. So we've been very consistent, I would say, over the last 5-6 years, and I would imagine this will continue. Then here's the good news on the rate increase. This is the survey that we normally do with our surrounding communities. This is our 2025 proposed rate against all of these other surrounding communities' 2024 rates. So I don't know what their increases will be this year, but even with our increase for this year, we're still the lowest on the list. And again, that's because of the Northwest Water Commission and what the village has done to maintain obtaining cheap water for our residents.
And the Northwest Water Commission includes Wheeling, Palatine, Arlington, and Buffalo Grove, correct?
That's right. Stormwater Fund. The Stormwater Fund was created back in 2016 to fund a stormwater management plan of about $48 million. The South Dunhurst project, which will be done next year with an additional $1 million transfer from the general fund that's worked into the numbers that I've given you so far today, is the last major project from that plan. So next year, the Public Works Department will do a new stormwater management plan, which we don't expect to have huge projects like South Dunhurst in it, but there will be projects nonetheless around the village. And as a result, we'll start to watch the stormwater fund a little harder in the coming years. Because if we don't need that money, we'll find somewhere else to use it, or we will stop collecting as much stormwater fee. But for this year, I'm still asking for a 25% increase to cover those costs, which is about $109,000 for the year.
That word was cent, 25-cent increase.
Yes, what did I say?
It sounded like percent, I
Oh,
got it.
yeah, I might have. Okay, and then here's the stormwater survey. And we're lower to middle pack on that. But again, this is our proposed increase versus everybody else's last year rate. Now we want to celebrate a little bit of our financial success. We've shown this slide for the last few years. We're a AA bond rating with Standard & Poor's. That's the third highest rating that they have. We have not issued any tax-related debt since the year 2009, and will be debt-free in 6 years by 2030. We've over-contributed to the pension funds for the last 10 years to help boost the unfunded liabilities there. And we've been a pay-as-you-go community for capital projects and TIF development incentives, as well as we've had the SURF fund since 1990, which helps us save for future assets, vehicles, and the like. Talking about the elimination of tax-related debt, here's the schedule. Right now, at the end of '24, we'll have about $24 million left to pay off. And you can see that it kind of goes down by about $4 million every year. That's because of the balloon payments that we've discussed over the last few years, and we've been saving money for to cover those costs. And then this is the comparison against our surrounding communities. You can see that we're very low compared to a number of the other communities. So that's great, because if you're not paying debt interest, then you're doing projects at the minimal cost. Down here you see the balloon payments. So again, like I mentioned, it's about $4 million a year, but once we hit 2030 and beyond, We won't need that money anymore for debt payments, and we'll be able to shuffle that around, use it for capital projects, and it'll be a reduction in what we're transferring out of the general fund. So we'll be able to have less property tax increases in the future if we don't need debt, because we'll be able to cover some of those expenditures with the gain from not having to transfer to make these payments. I wanted to mention the strategic plan and some of the things that we are up to meet those goals. One of our plans is to identify opportunities for new sources of revenue. Director Clicker has been looking into restructuring the business license fees. He may bring that to you in the next few months. This wouldn't increase or decrease license revenue. It would just shuffle it around to make it easier for our businesses to understand and to make it a little bit more equitable among the businesses. So, you don't necessarily want Walmart to be paying the same as Wheeling Donuts. They're not the same type of business. They shouldn't necessarily incur the same type of fees. So this restructuring will help with that. In addition, Chief Salela has been looking into CPR classes and stop the bleed or tourniquet training classes. The amounts we've been charging, $25, they just need to go up a little bit to $50 to cover the costs that we have to put on those classes. So that's a minor thing, but I wanted to mention it. And then special census. So I'm going to get into that in a few slides here, but if we were to do a special census to capture some of the growth we've had residentially in the village over the last few years, it would boost our income tax, use tax, motor fuel tax, and cannabis tax revenues. So we'll talk about that in a second. In addition, we're always looking for opportunities to capitalize on changes in the delivery of our core services. So the city of Des Plaines exited our IGA agreement to provide dispatching to them. So we took a hard look at dispatching since we were going to be dispatching it for ourselves. And we were able to reduce the cost going forward with a move to Northwest Central Dispatch. And I have some slides I'll show you in a second on those.
Can I point out, Brian?
Yes.
I hope this resonates, that when we talk about taking a deep dive as staff into the budget, when we're talking about identifying opportunities for new sources of revenue, and we're at CPR classes and Stop the Bleed at $25 each, I hope that resonates, that we're really looking at everything. And I don't say that to be funny. I say that because that's the level of effort that the departments are putting into making sure that we capture where appropriate and continue to provide services and get reimbursed for them at an appropriate level. But I did think, as I was looking at these slides when we were going over them, that it's an interesting fact that we're talking about, $25 versus, say, $50 for a CPR class as something that appears under our new sources of revenue. But I'm proud of that, because I think it shows how thorough we're being and how thorough we have been, that this is where we're at.
Okay, so let's move on to discussing the special census. So as I mentioned earlier, 2020 was the last time that municipal populations were reset for per capita revenues. But since then, the Village of Wheeling has developed multiple housing projects. Wheeling Town Center, I think it started in 2019, but we wouldn't have necessarily captured all of the residents that have moved in there. Uptown 500 is brand new since then. There's London Crossing, Union Apartments, Lakeside Villas, and the additional Prairie Park townhomes that are going in. So Director Becker sent Mary Ann Thanopoulos out to get an idea how many people have moved into these properties. And I'll discuss that in a second, but
Excuse me, Director
Yes.
Smith, Lakeside Villas, do you mean the villas at Prairie Park?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's what that
maybe,
should
yeah, maybe,
Yeah,
my
because-
fault.
Yes.
Yeah,
Just so you have confidence in the numbers I'm about to tell you. I did have Director Clicker had Steve Robles go through, and we've looked at every property that had a certificate of occupancy since April of 2020, when the census would have occurred. So we have a very solid understanding of the number of people that we're looking at. I just made a mistake. I
That's
apologize.
okay.
Thank you for pointing it out.
Up here, we were all going, haven't
Yeah.
they been around for a
Yeah.
long time?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
No, thank you. To do a special census, you can do a full census or a partial census. We'd be talking about doing a partial census to just capture the growth in the new developments. Because if you do a full census, first of all, it's going to cost a lot more. Second of all, your population could actually go down on you if you've had other areas where people have been moving out of. It's a very expensive process, and it's a very labor-intensive project. It's something that it's all hands on deck. A lot of our department heads will be involved, as well as their staffs. The cost that they list, the U.S. Census Bureau lists on their website, is $375,000 to $500,000, and we'd pay that up front. And then, in addition to that, we would provide space and phones and computers, and we would help hire the census people that would be doing the census. So it's a big deal to do this. It takes a lot of time and effort. But if we do it, we've estimated that there's about 1,650 people that have moved into these developments. And what I did was I went and I recalculated 2023's revenue using these additional people in our population compared to the full state's population, the way that the per capita revenue is distributed. And I came up with about $370,000 per year that we would receive from now until the 2030 census, when we would eventually capture those folks. And that would be spread out among income tax, motor fuel tax, and local use tax mostly. The process takes about a year, so even if we started now, the census probably wouldn't occur till around January of '26, and we'd probably start to receive the money somewhere around May or June. That's an estimate, but I talked to Pingree Grove, who's the last community to do a special census, and they gave me the full timeline that they've had, so it should be about the same. $370,000 a year is kind of like a temporary 2% property tax increase. So this would stabilize the village if we did hit a recession. It'd be beneficial to have this money.
So this is the pendulum swinging the other way. We just talked about $25 increases to CPR training, and now, much to Brian's credit, this was his idea to investigate a special census, and it is an idea that for very little investment would still yield, after we pay for it, about $1.5 million of free money. Free money, just by having the idea and implementing the idea. It's a big deal.
Okay, dispatching. So Des Plaines decided to leave, and as a result, we lose about $2.6 million of revenue. And these are the replacement costs. This is what it would cost the village to dispatch by themselves, with the exception of fire, which would still have been at Red Center. So there's, the director and dispatcher cost, the SURF contributions needed to maintain the equipment used, and all of the sundry operating costs. And that is also about $2.6 million. But then we did the deep dive, and the village was accepted into Northwest Central Dispatch in March, and that included a lot of costs too that weren't very exciting to look at. There was first an initial capital buy-in of almost $800,000 that they wanted, and all of Northwest Central Dispatch is getting new radios next year, so they wanted us to buy these radios for another $500,000, and all of that in addition to a normal annual operating cost for dispatching of $240,000 for both police and fire. We didn't like those numbers, So we negotiated a new agreement with them to loan them our radio room, or lease them our radio room for the next 10 years, and give them all of the equipment inside to be a backup center for them. In exchange, they're waiving the capital buy-in of $800,000 and waiving the cost of the portable radios. So we're left with just an annual cost of $240,000 directly related to Northwest Central Dispatch. It's a huge savings. That said, we still had some one-time costs to prepare and get ready to be a part of Northwest Central Dispatch. That added up to about $1 million, most of which we spent in the fiscal year 2024. And then you see the $658,000 listed there. That's the $240,000 for dispatching, plus our sundry costs. So that would be things like the AT&T connection, the UPS maintenance agreement, and office supplies and things like that. So at the end of the day, we saved that $2.6 million of cost that I showed you earlier, and in place of it, we have an annual cost of about $660,000. If you add in the one-time costs to get there, we have a savings at the end of 2025 of about $900,000. We're going to use some of that money to get two new records clerks and one additional CSO, which makes our savings at the end of 2025 about $645,000. That said, going into 2026 and beyond, we'll only be spending about $900,000 a year instead of that $2.6 million, and we'll be saving about $1.7 million a year going forward.
Do we pay for maintenance of the equipment, or
No.
do they?
They do.
Of the equipment that they're using in the backup room, they will be paying for.
And just, if we were to liquidate that equipment, what would that have given us?
So they gave us that amount of money for that equipment. We took our fixed assets, our useful lives calculations, and we calculated the remaining value of those assets, and they gave us that number. So we wouldn't have get any more if we sold the assets ourselves.
Assuming we could even find a buyer.
Yeah, I would argue
Used
that we would
radio
have gotten
equipment
less.
is not.
Pennies
is
on the
not-
dollar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, we've reached my last topic of the day, pension funding. We need to be 90% funded by the year 2040. One interesting topic is we're getting closer to being more, made up of more Tier 2 employees than Tier 1 employees. We reached 48% this year, Tier 2 employees. Though that's important because Tier 2 pensions cost us less than Tier 1 pensions. So we have reduced costs going forward. And we always like to let you know that we do not pay Social Security on police and firefighters. They don't get Social Security when they retire, and that's why their pension benefits are a little bit better than the other groups in the village. I want to talk about unfunded liabilities and how a bad investment year can affect them. You can see here we had good returns in 2021, and that reduced our unfunded liabilities and raised our funded percentage rate. We were doing very well at that time. We were about 80% funded at police, and we were actually overfunded at IMRF. We were at 110%, so we had a negative unfunded liability. But then 2022 happened. The returns were very bad. As you may recall, our pension funds actuarials assume a 7.25% return annually. So when you have a negative 16% or negative 18% return, you're losing all of that and the 7.25 you thought you were going to come up with during the year. So as a result, our unfunded liabilities shot up $30 million in 1 year. Then you had 2024 or 2023. The annual returns were good, above what we normally expect. And so the unfunded liabilities dropped, but only down to 61 million. So, we haven't made it back to where we were in 2022 yet. So that's the game we play, and that's why we continue to contribute with TIF surpluses and with our general fund surplus, because we're always chasing that rabbit.
We talk about the 90% by 2040. It's a moving target. Do you think the state is finally going to realize that it's almost impossible to attain? And is it worthwhile to attain?
Well, I suspect that they'll push that date back, like they've done in the past. Do you want to say
The
something?
second part of your question, I think, is going to be something we're going to have to grapple with in the near future. I agree with Director Smith. I think that the state will push that date, but what that will do is create a conversation that we have to have about still trying to make the current deadline happen. Pushing the date back is great if you are in a situation where your numbers are, you're 20% funded, whatever, you're kicking the can. But financially, it's costing the community substantially more to push that obligation out 10 years than it would be to meet it on its current schedule. I mean, we can argue all day long about whether 90% is the right number or not, which I personally think is ridiculous. But nevertheless, it exists. So reaching that number, I would say today, is still something we should try to do at the current schedule, even if the state kicks it 10 years, because you're just going to end up spending more money. If you fund less, your obligation's just going to grow, and in those last few years, there's no way you're going to be able to make those payments.
Yeah,
But that is a conversation for, I suppose, another day, if the state makes the determination that they're going to push it out 10 years.
One comforting thing to know is that in our actuarials, we use 100% funded by 2040. So we're contributing that much more in an effort to get to the 90.
Right. Thank you.
And Brian, I don't think you pointed it out, but even this year, our requirement went down, and did I literally just steal your thunder?
No, go for it.
No, it's all you. It was the next slide. I was so close.
Okay. So as Manager Spondilis mentioned,
Script, there's an agenda.
No, this is what's coming next.
okay.
Go.
the police and fire pensions contributions went down collectively by about 80,000 for next year. But the budget does include the same number. So we're going to contribute that additional 80,000 as well.
And also, whenever we have a surplus, a TIF surplus, we typically donate to.
That's
oh,
this
sorry.
You're absolutely right.
Mary, you and I are going to get a timeout here in a minute.
Right. What else is new?
So the green bar is our required contribution by year, and the blue piece above it is the additional contributions that the village has been making. So from 2011 to 2023, we were required actuarially to contribute $67.4 million. From 2011 to 2023, the village has also contributed an additional 11.5 million, or 17% above what we were required to contribute during that time. So, the village is doing everything it needs to meet these obligations. We're just at the whim of the investment returns. And that is all I have for you today. We have the village board checklist here of a number of things that John will take you through.
So before we get into this, and I mean, you see the 5 topics, and I promise we can get through these, I think, pretty painlessly. But do we have any questions about what we've covered so far for Brian?
I want to just, we talk about the 90%, pensions being 90% funded, 100% funded. And it always sounds like, oh, that's great. Of course they should be 100% funded. But that is so ridiculous. from my perspective. But I know I have a lot more information at my disposal than most people. But my understanding is that when the state says we need to have our pensions 90% funded, that means we need to account for 90% of our staff retiring, right?
Yeah, it's 90% funding of the future costs.
Right.
Of existing employees and
Right.
and retired.
That's pretending that tomorrow, 90% of our staff is going to retire. And this is my opinion. This is the result of some political, sounds good, warm and fuzzy election thing years ago. We should have pensions 100% funded. Then all of that money that we could be spending on roads and plumbing and police and fire in real time is now locked away in the pension fund. There has to be money in the pensions. These guys have worked. They do deserve a pension. They do deserve secure retirement. But that was my opinion, that was such a ridiculous requirement to put out there.
It's a private sector model bleeding into the public sector.
Yeah, we're not going to go bankrupt.
Well, but that's exactly it. In the private sector, you want to have your pension funds funded as high as possible. Should the company go bankrupt, there's still money there to meet the obligations of your pension.
Right.
The reason it's silly, because I agree with your assessment, is it assumes that the village dissolves. And that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So, the issue, just to be clear to any employee who's getting nervous, the issue is not whether or not the employees deserve a pension. Of course you do, or changing the pension at all. No, of course. It is simply the idea that we've got all this money sitting in the bank that could otherwise be utilized for the benefit of everybody, while still ensuring that the employees get the pension that they are deserving.
There was a force to save because some communities and organizations weren't saving for their pensions at all or very little, and this forced them to get on board and start saving for it. Where we have been all this time, some haven't.
Right.
Some communities haven't been putting money away, and so
Yeah.
now it sort of forces
Trustee
them to.
Lang's right. These rules have a lot more to do with southern Illinois than they do with the northwestern suburbs.
Yep.
Anyway.
I mean, that number still could have been somewhere around 60%, but
Yes.
that's absolutely it. We're
Agree.
being punished. And I think that happens a lot. I think that scenario happens a lot where, we have the opportunity to function at a different level than a lot of municipalities
And I'll add
outside
one-
the Chicagoland area.
I'll add one more thing to that. The date of 2040 is an arbitrary date chosen to help fill out those actuarials, okay? But there are other states who use a 5-year rolling period. So, if the state were to switch to something like that, they'd never have to change that date again, but we'd still be able to continue to do our actuarial reports, and we'd still be required to do the same kind of contributions. So it's a result of the funding mechanism, and not necessarily that we need to have all this money there by 2040. It's just part of the calculation.
All right,
I'm sorry, I'm done.
Don't sit, because you may need to fill
okay.
in the blanks here
No problem.
somewhere. Okay, so the next 5 topics, a couple different categories within those topics. The first 2, 1 and 2, just want to reaffirm some direction. We talked about a few major topics this morning, and staff just wants to make sure that we are moving in the right direction. The first is the special census, as Director Smith detailed. It would provide to us a net gain of about $1.5 million between now and 2030. We would have to go through the process, hire the census workers, go through all of that. But, you heard kind of the story and the gain. Staff intends to move forward with that unless we hear otherwise from the board.
Question, how is the special census done? Is it electronic? Is it knock on doors?
They
Is
send
it-
out the
what-
cards.
What is the cost involved?
Well, they list on their website 375 to 500,000
Right.
would be our cost. There would be, the additional cost rolled into that of, providing them with laptops and things like that they need to do the census. My understanding is they mail out cards. But we would also be in charge of promoting the census. So I talked to Chief Dunn about potentially using Sherry Matthews-Huizar, who has helped us promote the normal census in the past. So we'd want to get ahead of it and talk to these communities, these specific developments, and encourage people to respond to the census.
So they get a card that they complete and send back in? I mean, is it manual or
believe
is it
so.
electronic?
I don't know for sure yet.
So we have not registered as doing this yet, so we will get more
Yeah.
information, but typically the answer to that is yes. And then it's a long period, because then if the first deadline comes and goes and the response rate isn't high enough, then they go and knock on doors. And there are things we would do, because if you think about where we're talking about, it's easy enough to canvass the whole area simply by hosting, an event in a conference room at Town Center or Uptown and, providing the residents with all the information. But I think where you're going, and I would agree, the amount of money that they're charging versus the actual expense,
Okay.
there's a significant amount of,
That's insane. I'm in the wrong line of work.
there's a
Yeah.
significant amount of revenue that they generate there, but.
Very good, thank you, that's all I need.
I'm willing. I don't know if everybody would trust me, but.
So again, unless there's other direction, we're going to pursue that. Of course, we will keep you in the loop as we move forward with the details of the program. But if that meets everyone's expectations, we'll move forward with that. The second reaffirmation of direction is the grocery tax. We had discussed that in our one-on-ones, and this morning we talked about the impact of the loss of the 1%, which equals $670,000 annually, or a 4% tax levy increase. The thought is to put the ordinance forward as part of this year's budget packet, which we will do unless we hear otherwise.
Any objections?
All right, so now the fun stuff. Topic number 3 is the fountain, and I will ask Director Kalp to fill in the blanks where I run astray. We have the Friendship Park Fountain, which is coming up on 25 years old. Beautiful. It has become a landmark for the Village of Wheeling, and it is an important part of our aesthetic for the community. That said, it has had very little maintenance, mostly because of the design, particularly for the infrastructure, makes it very difficult to reach and do any kind of maintenance on it, to the point where we had a fairly substantial issue with water loss over the last couple of years. The Department of Public Works spent an awful lot of time looking for the issue and believes at this point they have solved it. In fact, we had to re-engage the original engineer from 25 years ago to come in and try and decipher the reality of what is underground versus what the original plans were, because there were a number of field changes made that wreaked a bit of havoc on the design of the system. To that point, we now have an asset that is 25 years old and needs some significant rebuild, and it leaves us with really 2 choices, and that is a question that we're introducing today. It is not an expense that we need to fund today, but we're looking forward. So this conversation is really about including the fountain and its repairs in the 2026 through 2030 CIP. And that is the estimate from the original designer and his company, CMT. They've submitted a formalized report on it, is about $3 million to dig out the infrastructure, and I'll let Dan kind of talk about the details of that. $3 million to rebuild what you see out there, or $5 million to raise, redesign, and start over. So the difference, that $2 million difference, I'm calling aesthetic, because we would be buying a 30-year fountain with either option, but the $3 million gives you a refresh on what you see out there, but everything is new underneath, and $5 million gives you a newly designed fountain. Dan, did I miss anything?
You have hit just about everything on my bullet point list, yes. So, the fountain was built in 2002, and while I would say maintenance has been performed, we have an annual maintenance program with the fountain. What hasn't been contemplated is an exit strategy. And while we have found one of our leaks, one of the significant leaks, we were losing about 1,800 gallons of water per hour. It's metered water, so it's not a unaccounted for water loss. But that's water that we're paying the Northwest Water Commission for without really reaping the benefits of. We found a leak, and as of late Friday afternoon, we were still losing about 1,000 gallons of water per hour after we refilled the fountain. The plan is in the spring, we're going to also replace the liners. We're going to pull all of the stones out of the 8 riffle pools and reline it. It's included in the budget, the draft budget in front of you, and then see where we are. But regardless of what the results of that maintenance project is, we're still playing a game of whack-a-mole with chasing problems based on the deteriorating condition of the fountain. And so, to Manager Sfondilis's point, we have to contemplate what's next, and that's either the replacement of the fountain, which is to raise the structure completely and reimagine what can go on the site, or to replace what we have there structurally, electronically, and with the plumbing system for $3 million. The replacement of the entire fountain would be $5 million. And so with that, as Manager Sfondilis said, we're not looking for anything from the board today, but it's just a contemplation on what we would like to see as a community between now and 2030, which is what staff is estimating the timeline for us to have to do something with the site. Yes, Trustee Lang?
Question. So, using the CIP funds in the short term is a great idea, because that'll allow us to get this back to whole again. But going forward, we're still gonna have issues with that pond, with the fountain. What if we, and when we have large expenses like that, what we usually do is create a SURF. So what if we created a aesthetic SURF, but that also included other things like holiday lighting and the plants and everything else, and it took care of, it was a fund that took care of aesthetics in the village ongoing. Now we would have money put aside that we would always have, instead of this big chunk that we have to deal with.
We can do that in parts. SURF doesn't fund programs, it funds specific assets. So, well, but
It's an asset.
the fountain is, I just don't know about these, like, we don't surf for the lights, for the Christmas lights, which, I'm sorry, the holiday lights, which, by the way, will be coming to us shortly, because they're about to outlive their useful life. But yeah, we could surf for the replacement of the fountain in 2060 if we take action in 2030. So yes, I just wanted to draw a distinction between the asset and the program.
Yeah, get it, and it's just, I mean, short term, we can fix it, and we'll have the funding, or we'll find the funding to fix it. But then long term, because it's, we're gonna, our replacements one of these days are gonna run into this same issue. And if there's money set aside for that, then it's gonna make it a lot easier to swallow.
Yes, and I suppose, speaking of that, there are 2 major assets that are not currently surfed, and it would be impossible to do so. And there's a plan, which is Wheeling Road and Wolf Road. we took over through a jurisdictional transfer 2 years ago at this point, Wolf Road. Figure it has a 30-year lifespan. The estimate last we talked was probably a $30 million replacement in 30 years. The problem, and the reason we're not surfing for it is because that would put $1 million encumbrance annually on our SURF, which we simply can't absorb. Same with Wheeling Road. And we're dealing with, and you've heard us talk about repairing, replacing Wheeling Road in the next couple of years, and the struggles that we're fighting financially to try and find grants and other sources to pay for that because Wheeling Road was not served. But same problem is if you were to put $1 million away for one road a year, that's an awful lot of money that could be used elsewhere. That, in my estimation, and Brian, you can say your own opinion, is the appropriate use of bonds. Same with water meters.
Yeah.
But that is and this is not kicking the can, this is the plan intentionally for dealing with Wolf Road in 30 years. And within the next couple of years, we will have Wheeling Road rebuilt. That will be the intentional plan for Wheeling Road 30 years after that. But absolutely we can for the fountain following this cycle of repair replacement.
Yeah, the revenue sources for capital projects and MFT are tight, they're limited. Motor fuel tax will be dropping. It's a result of electric vehicles and their use. If you're not paying for gas, then you're not paying the motor fuel tax, which means communities are getting less in return.
We are paying slight motor.
Yes, I know there is a slight tax with the licensing, I believe, of the vehicles, but it's not an ongoing payment that, there's some thought that will go down over time, and there might need to be a shuffle in how motor fuel tax is distributed or collected. It would be tough to be putting $1 million away every year, as Manager Svandilas said, because that would be a majority, it'd be a significant piece of the revenue that we do collect annually in capital projects.
So
I'm sorry. On the fountain, history-wise, when, back in 2000 or 2002, when that fountain started going up, and I wasn't on the board, but I paid attention to everything that went on here. I thought, why? Why are we creating this big behemoth that costs a lot of money? In retrospect, the fountain in front of the police station, which was then Village Hall, what's the maintenance on that? It's simple, it's elegant, it has the same effect. Yet, a few years ago, we asked the question of, should we get rid of the fountain because something, development wanted to go into the corner of Milwaukee and Dundee. And I said, no, we spent a lot of money on that fountain and we spend it every year. Do we just trash it? But I look at the budget, and I had this discussion with Director Kaup. When does it end? You found the leak, but there's probably more. We're still going through, would you say, 1,000 gallons an hour of water that's not being accounted for. Is this just going to continue to get worse and worse? Do we bring it down to a more manageable level by spending the $5 million redesigning it? Do we, Rosemont got rid of their fountain at the corner of River and I think Devon. I'm not quite sure what street it was on, that everybody knew where the fountain was, and when it went away, nobody missed it. Most people don't even realize it's been gone for years now. How much money are we going to keep throwing at this before we finally say, we've spent $10 million, over a 10-year time period, and we have a fountain that's pretty? Do we need something else in that area? When do we cut our losses and run, I guess?
That is certainly a policy decision.
Right.
But I would say from an economic development standpoint, the opportunity to use that land for any kind of commercial or retail use has passed. With the Solex building being reconstituted as a luxury apartment building, that land will always be can only be some form of pocket park. Whether that's a fountain or something else is a policy decision the board has to make. But the opportunity to turn it into, and I think this was publicly discussed, so I'm not speaking out of school, a CVS has come and gone. So just,
Right, and
it's something to
I'm-
consider as the board.
I
ponders
understand
this
that, but a pocket park or some sort of a park has got to cost a lot less than the maintenance on that fountain. Or even a smaller fountain would be a lot less than what we're currently paying every year.
I absolutely, it is expensive, but I would like to also highlight, I think that this instance brings to light the importance of asset management and contemplating smart design. The fountain that exists in reality is not reflected in any reasonable way in the as-builds. The fountain was built in a way that field conditions were considered paramount over design, and so they were just making decisions that were not reflected in any way that we can follow. When we're digging up the pipes don't go in any direction that would be sensible to the person trying to make the repair. Those are some of the challenges that we have that wouldn't necessarily exist in perpetuity if we were able to redesign it. And then to Manager Fondilis's point, contemplating, and Trustee Lang's idea of having a sinking fund similar to what the SURF offers us for our fleet, to be able to proactively account for future costs so we can avoid these types of conversations in the future.
So for this year, we never want to surprise the board with particularly something like a $3 or $5 million decision. So if it's okay, our thought is to simply use this year, at least the first half of it, to try and get a better handle on what's going on and better projections for a conversation about exact numbers for repair and or replacement, and come to you at some point during the year so that we can prepare next year's CIP appropriately based on your direction. So this is not a conversation that this isn't it. This is just an introduction so that you all have enough time just to think about some of the things that we talked about here. Fair enough? Is that okay with everybody? So you have the idea. We will come back to you with it. Okay. Topic number 4, Clear Harbor. So this can be very complicated, but this isn't meant to be an update. There is a specific question that comes at the end of this posed by Trustee Vogel, and it is a matter of financial contribution from the village. That's where I'm going with all of this. So by introduction, so everyone knows what we're talking about, Clear Harbor is the replacement program for household hazardous waste. If you recall, the village used to participate in the At Your Door program through Waste Management. In the new contract with Waste Management, we eliminated that program where every water bill included an amount for At Your Door. And what we realized over the past 5 years, as great of a program as it is, and it is, it was not being utilized
Garbage bill, not
enough.
water bill.
I'm sorry, garbage bill, thank you. It was not being utilized by our residents enough, and what was happening is that Waste Management was getting a huge check from our residents effectively at the end of every year. So that was frustrating. We eliminated the At Your Door program, and SWANK, the Solid Waste Agency of Northern Cook County, of which the village is a member, is instituting a program with a company called Clear Harbor, who does the same thing. It is a home pickup program for household hazardous waste. So we know all that. We talked about that a bit before when we did the waste management contract. The village considered a contract directly with Clear Harbor. The pickup cost was exceptionally high, and at the time I mentioned that SWANK was looking at the exact same program and that there would be savings if we joined through SWANK. So that is what we have done. Wheeling is a participating member now of this program through Clear Harbor. Pickups will begin December 1st, well, in the month of December. And this month in November, we're going to roll out all the information about the program, how to sign up, all the details. The question is on the funding source. Clear Harbor's contract with Swank is $175 per pickup. That amount of money, which sounds like a lot of money, but if you did the math based on our actuals with Waste Management, it totaled about $400 and some odd dollars, actually closer to $5 per pickup with Waste Management, simply because the public wasn't using the program. Okay, $175. The program is split not in half, but in two parts, where the resident would pay $75 for the pickup of up to 70 pounds of household hazardous waste. Swank will pay the other $100 of the $175 fee. A little bit of an asterisk there. By Swank paying for it, that just means that the village will be paying that $100 as part of a true-up at the end of the year. So that is the program, that's the way it exists, period, kind of end of sentence, and the way it exists in every other community. Through our budget conversations, Trustee Vogel asked a question, which now I'm bringing up here for your consideration. He asked whether the village could pay the other $75 so that the resident is not paying anything for these pickups. It would total based on the highest year of use from the previous At Your Door program. We used the number of 500 pickups per year. It would be about $30,000 a year that the village would be paying for this program aside from the true-up. Should you wish to consider that, we did a bit of a deep dive to try and figure out any option aside from just writing a check out of the general fund. And one of the things that makes sense, and if you want to consider paying this offset, staff would suggest that the resource for the revenue be the Stormwater Utility Fund. It does align with NPDES, which is the National
Non-point source pollution
I was very close. I lost it at N.
it's stuff that goes into the waterways.
That's why it was funny. Listen, it's been like 20 years since I've been in public works. So it does align with the goals of NPDES, which is a requirement from the federal level about eliminating hazardous waste into our sewer system. Meh. Okay, so the question before you is, the program as it exists and is being implemented in other communities is $175, 100 of it being paid by Swank, 75 being paid by the resident at the time of appointment. That is option one, which is as the program exists. Option two is that the village offsets the $75 portion using stormwater utility revenue. Is that, yes, for this, but is that clear? We could get lost in a lot of details, but I tried to bottom line.
Do we pay all of it, or do we pay 100? That's the question.
Do we pay? Yes.
But on the 100, either way, the village is going to pay at least 100, right?
Yes, there's a true
Where
up.
does that 100 come from?
There's a true up process that it would come from the general fund, but it would be offset by revenue generated from the true up for the operations and maintenance side of the garbage contract with Swank. So we wouldn't necessarily be writing a check for $100 times however many pickups there are. We would just be receiving less revenue from our true up of the O&M side of Swank. Is that enough acronyms for everybody?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. Dan, or Brian, did I miss anything there?
No, I think that's correct. So the true up happens at the beginning of each year. The Swank estimates the tonnage, the total amount of garbage that Wheeling will produce, and they assign a value, a per ton tipping fee value for the aggregate of the waste. They're usually pretty conservative with that estimate, and so at the time of the true up, we typically get a small amount of money back because we didn't generate the total waste that they estimated. in the process of this program, when Clean Harbors picks up however many tons of, or however many pickups, they will charge us the estimated $50,000, which is a reflection of the 500 pickups per year, and they'll take that off of the true-up that we would get as a rebate. Brian records that as a revenue.
So
so it's-
revenue would go down a little bit.
The revenue would go down by the $50,000 if the full 500 pickups occur, or by $80,000 if the 500 pickups occur and the village wants to provide a 100% cost reimbursement for the resident.
Do we know how much hazardous waste just gets dumped anyway? And does waste management kind of, they don't, obviously don't find the communities, if that's the case, for if they find this hazardous waste in the pickups?
Well, it wouldn't be waste management, it would be a state agency. So it would either be the IEPA or the IDNR doing the investigation and the fining of
Well,
somebody.
but I think the question is if you just put it in your garbage bag, is
Right.
that,
Yeah, I think that's probably what a lot of people just do.
and I don't mean to speak for trustee Vogel, I think that is the point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna have to pay $75, I think unfortunately people are gonna say, I'm not gonna pay it, I'm gonna put it in the garbage.
Right.
And so hopefully it reverts to where it should go instead of being in the garbage. But that, I think too, was, I had that question the same as he did. Well, does waste management come back to us and say, hey, we're finding hazardous waste in our pickups in the village? Do they ever communicate back to us?
I've never had a call like that. Have you?
There's been instances where.
Christine, could you, if you're gonna, please.
There have been a small number of instances where Waste Management does find paint cans that residents have not, had their paint hardened, and it does spill over, and they actually slap a tag on those containers, letting residents know future-wise they won't be collected unless, situation. But, to everyone's point, yes, there have been instances where, some spray cans have been found, if they haven't been contained in containers or so forth, but none of recently that Waste Management has ever relayed to me in that respect. But to your concerns, yes, that would be a concern as far as any future, where some of the hazardous waste does go, with the likelihood that, residents would choose the lesser option of disposing it in with their garbage.
This is definitely, as much as this is, a hot topic, this is a social program. This is trying to do the right thing to keep the bad stuff out of the garbage. I mean, that's what this is.
So,
But the program exists. So the question is simply,
100 versus 175.
does the village offset the additional $75 to make it a zero-sum game for the resident?
Okay. And I think that's a valid point, the concern that, will people not and do the incorrect thing if they don't have the 100% paid for. The one thing I would say is the village does incur the cost for residents who choose to set up an appointment but don't fulfill it, or any sort of level pickup. So it's $175 regardless of whether or not there's 20 half-filled paint cans or one half-filled paint can. If we're going to consider, one of the nice things about having the resident have skin in the game monetarily is that they would contemplate the value of the quantity, or or them filling the actual pickup. If there is nothing out there on the day of the pickup, the village still gets charged $75 for a non-pickup. If we were to pay it all, I would just ask the board to contemplate, is there also a value to then charging back, or putting a notice that says that if you don't pick it up, then there's a charge that is associated with that miss.
And just to be clear, when we say paint, we're talking about oil-based paint. Latex paint can be dried out and put in your garbage can. So just to set for anybody listening thinking that this is just about wall paint.
Well, pesticides, gas.
Yeah, all that stuff I just give.
So it's only for chemical waste, though, it's not for electronics?
Correct, correct. But there are multiple Swank-sponsored electronic recycling events. There are, I believe, Mount Prospect and Hoffman Estates both have permanent sites from April through October, where every one day of the week, it changes in communities, you just go and drop off your stuff, and that's available to every member of Swank. And then Swank does satellite pickups where it would be, one day in the Public Works garage, bring your electronics. So long answer to an easy question, no, it does not include electronic. And we'll advertise all this. This is just about the funding source. So the full program rollout will include all the details.
Okay. Have we beat the horse to death? Okay. So the question is, the village pays $100 or the village pays the full $175 with some sort of penalty if they don't put stuff out?
Which would be 75, it would be.
75. Got it? Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
No. Orange. 100 versus, the village pays the 100 or the village pays the 175 with the 75 back if they don't put something out?
Village pays 175.
Okay. Kruger?
I want the provision for them to be billed back.
The 175 with the bill back.
175 and the bill back if they don't know.
Joyce?
Pay full and provision if they skip out.
Okay. Lang?
Same.
Vito?
Same.
Okay, and I agree with the 175 with the 75 bucks.
Excellent. And for the
took
record.
way
the
too
funding
long to get
source
there.
again- Well, but it's a complicated, and we'll be the only community doing this. So, I mean, this is precedent setting or however we want to advertise that. So great. All right, moving on to the very last item on the agenda are the pink sheets, which I have printed for you for your convenience. We will go through each of these. I will present them briefly and then turn it over to the appropriate department head. So if everybody has the packet that I handed out, or if you are looking at it in the budget book or online, we are beginning on page 135. And the first item, I guess we should explain, does anybody care about pink sheets? Do we need the explanation? No, great. These are expanded level sheets that, if they have my signature, are already included in the budget. If they don't, there's always a vote on each of these, but the one that isn't, should the board agree to it, would be added then into the budget. Or Brian made an assumption that you'd say yes, so it's already in. All right, very good. Beginning on page 135, fitness room upgrade from the police department. With the construction of the new fire station, there is a fair amount of work that is being done, has been done, and will be done inside the police department. This just provides for some upgrade of the equipment within the fitness room. It's $10,000. I think it makes perfect sense if we're going to ask and encourage, as we do, our employees to have a physical fitness routine. We need to make sure that we're providing them with safe and appropriate equipment. This makes sense to me. Chief Dunn, anything to add?
No, we have equipment in there now that is aged and is well worn out, and the opportunity with the fire department leaving creates a little bit more space, and we can update the equipment a little bit. It'd be great. The room does get utilized quite a bit.
Keep it in? Vogel?
Yes.
All nods yes on my left. Keep it in? Right? Yes, keep it in.
All right, item number 2 on page 136 is an annual donation to Northwest Compass Housing Agency. In retrospect, I question whether I should have signed this, because this really is a policy decision, one that I completely support, but certainly this is a question for the board as to whether or not this is a program you want to participate in. I thought it was a great idea. This is some additional help for our social service workers. Chief Dunn, can you explain the Northwest Compass Housing Advocacy Program?
But we're looking for we've been for several years looking for other avenues and opportunities to deal with the on again, off again homeless situation. We've run into a wall, roadblocks, when we use government resources and we move homeless people from one place to another. And this is a private entity, and they would actually come out and be able to house people. And it's just another tool in our toolkit to use with these individuals. As we know, most of the homeless in this area actually are not really unhoused. They just choose to be in the situation they're at. And this is just, we're looking to fill a void and use, this is just another opportunity to do that.
Questions?
And then they require the community to make a donation for them to service the area, because they are private.
Just out of curiosity, how often do we use it per year? Do you know? I mean, is it?
Well, we have not utilized this service yet. This would be new to us. Right now, our last court of usefulness would be Cook County, and they do come out, they do try, but we're not seeing a very good success rate.
Any other questions? None? Trustee Vogel?
Give it a try for a year.
Lepantos?
Yes.
Vito?
Yes.
Lang, yes. Kruger?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. I'm a yes also.
Thank you, and we'll report back how many times we used it and if it was effective.
Page 137 and 138, they are two different items, but they both fulfill kind of the same idea. Page 137 is the Lucas compression CPR device. Page 138 is a Zoll monitor. In both cases, the village owns a number of each, but each request would allow for the purchase of one additional that would put into frontline service a new vehicle. In the case of the Lucas compression CPR device, it would be housed within the battalion chief's vehicle, which on many occasions can actually be the first responder when ambulances are all out on a call. As the name suggests, it is a compression device that provides chest compressions, increases ability to sustain life-saving circulation during prolonged resuscitation attempts. You can read it yourself. Chief Salela can explain it in more detail if you'd like. And on page 138, the Zoll monitor is also a heart monitor and defibrillator. This, although the village owns a number of these as well, would be housed on the ladder truck, which, same explanation, with 3 ambulances, we often have, even when we have 3 ambulances in service, there is often a number of calls happening at the same time where we have a different vehicle being the first responder on scene. So this would allow the ladder truck to become an advanced life support vehicle. Again, all of this is done to try and provide the quickest and best service in health emergencies for our community. Chief Salela, did I miss anything? So then, and again, they are 2 separate items.
You just consider them both at once.
How
You
many,
just consider
how
them both
many
at once.
ambulances do we have?
Huh?
How many ambulances do we have?
We run, physically, how many do we have, including like backup, or how many do we run?
Just the Zoll monitor expanded sheet says all 4 ambulances.
We have 4 physical ambulances, but one of them is a backup. So we try to run 3. We always run 2. We try to run 3, depending on staffing. That 4th ambulance is a backup because we can't, appropriately, we can't allow one to be down and not have service.
And one of these devices will go in that one too.
They are already in the ambulances.
Already in
This
that.
would be added to the ladder truck.
Oh, got it.
Trustee Kruger?
Yes,
On both?
yes.
Trustee Lang?
Yes, sir.
Trustee Vito?
Yes.
Trustee Lepantos?
Yes.
Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
I am also a yes.
Thank you. Page 139, also from the fire department. This is software. It is fire prevention inspection software. There are details which we are happy to explain about what the software does, but this is part of just an ongoing attempt to use software to its highest advantage for our ability to serve the community. What they are using now is a bit outdated and doesn't communicate with the upgrades that we have made through other software packages in CD and throughout the village. The fire department has found this particular company and is asking, and has vetted the software and is asking for the purchase for a total of $17,500 for this vendor. Chief Salela, is there anything specific you want to add?
Yeah, this ties in with community development as well, and we're gonna propose new building codes next year, and so the software allows the inspectors to go out with the latest updates in the building codes, and if there's changes made throughout the year, then when they have a violation, that's all reflected, and they can automatically email the business owner or the customer, and then it's tied to the Outlook system as well. We were able to negotiate that $10,000 price down to $9,000. So the initial would be $9,000 and then $7,500 per year thereafter.
And so the 7,500, if this is approved, the 7,500 going forward will then just be part of the regular budget?
Correct.
Is there an annual cost now for the existing software?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's about $4,000 a year. I think it was 4,600.
So that would go away, so
Yes.
it's even less.
Trustee Lang? Yes. Trustee Krueger?
Yep.
Trustee Papantos?
Yes.
Trustee Vito?
Yes.
Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
I'm a yes.
All right, and the last item for your consideration this morning is page 140 from the Public Works Department. It is titled Invasive Plant Control Program.
Did we skip the
there's two of them.
accreditation?
Yeah, there's a
What?
IPWA.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You want to do this?
You just took them in order, that's all. Oh, I'm sorry, so it's not the last. Sorry, I'm in order, but it is not the last, my bad. Still, page 140, Invasive Plant Control Program. This is unsigned, but I do fully support it. I simply wanted to make sure that we discuss the matter and reaffirm the village's enforcement policy. This is an opportunity to handle an invasive weed, a noxious weed. I'm still going to call it a noxious weed. Buckthorn. It is an issue that has been in our area for quite a long time. This has come up because we have been enforcing private property owners to remove said buckthorn, and in that process, recognize that the village has a fair amount of buckthorn on its property. And obviously, if we are going to enforce our code, which does prohibit buckthorn, we need to make sure that we eliminate any presence of it on our properties. That is what this program is. Dan, any further detail you want to provide? All right.
I have a,
Trustee Lang?
so I'm fully in support of this program, but I also think that the average resident does not know what a buckthorn looks like, and so on, whether they have it or not, and therefore, it's still thriving. So if there's some sort of education, like what the leaf looks like on our website, if we were able to post that in our newsletter, things that help resident identify what a buckthorn is and how they should get rid of it, because I think that's necessary. There's still a lot on public property. My neighbor had one growing and left it grow, but I talked his maintenance people into taking it out for me. So they did, but people don't know they have it. And so if we educate them a little bit better, I think that'll help on the private side as well. Thank you.
So, okay. So $100,000 to remove buckthorn.
I just got a question. Where is this buckthorn at on village sites? Like, because every village site I know of is just grass. I don't know of any buckthorn.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I'm asking. I don't know.
Yeah,
Where's the
no.
buckthorn site? I wanna
Anytime
go
you
check out some
see
buckthorn
an
today.
open area that has a thicket or a stand of trees where you can't see through it, that undergrowth is almost inevitably buckthorn. And so a lot of areas around, so a bad area by our facility is around the lake, Echo Lake, across from your property. There's a lot of it. You guys have some also around Ridgefield. But it's those, whenever you see that type of scenario where you see a stand of trees, but you can't see through it, that's buckthorn.
I'm gonna go take it down.
Take it
today.
down.
I had to Google it. I'm one of those guys that Ray was talking about. I didn't know what the hell it was.
We will do that. I think that is an excellent point, and we can absolutely make a flyer. We can do some education on what buckthorn is so people know, and
The removal would be a great character builder for juvenile delinquents.
It's tough.
Just the way I was raised.
It's tough. It doesn't want to die. It's a very
it
hardy
does
plant. It's fast growing. It's a hardwood, and if it's too big for you to just to snip with clippers, it's going to grow back and grow back and grow back. And so once it establishes itself, it's really a nuisance.
Does it also spread to like neighboring properties?
Oh, yeah.
So that if the village doesn't take care of their own backyard, we could be,
Yeah.
if,
So they have berries, and the berries are very appealing to birds, and so it is spread. It's not just adjacent properties. It's anywhere in the community because
so
these
when,
birds eat
at
these
Joe's
berries.
house, when, it's around the lake there, it's gonna end up in his backyard eventually.
Yeah, yeah.
I got people for that.
If they know what buckthorn is.
Anyway, back to the matter, $100,000 to evasive weed, trustee Vito,
Yes.
trustee Kruger,
Yep,
trustee Papantos,
Yes.
trustee Vogel,
Yes.
trustee Lang.
Yes, but is this ongoing or just a one-time shot?
The $100,000 is, it'll be a 2-year program for us to get it under control, and then after that, it's maintenance, and so it's a much less significant cost.
Excellent. There are hazardous chemicals that can be used to, well, never mind. I'm a yes also. Next item there,
Raise our swing fees, so forget it.
yeah, there you
There's
go.
some irony in the fact that the last one is the one that I forgot. The final one, APW accreditation, something near and dear to my heart for many, many years. The department has talked about accreditation for quite a while, but as with any professional organization, your house needs to be in a very particular order before you can begin the review and analysis process through a professional organization to become accredited. I am very happy to say that we are at the point where we believe that we have the SOPs, the standard operating procedures. We have all of our analytics. We have all of our operations organized and in order and ready to join the accreditation through the American Public Works Association. This is a moment of pride for me and the department, just in the fact that we have come this far, separate and apart from, whether you bless this or not. I think the department deserves recognition for the work that it has done to get here. It has been a long time coming and a great thing for the department and, as always, for the residents and businesses. Dan, do you want to speak about anything in specific?
No, I feel the same. It's a heavy lift. It's while we have a good foundation of policies and operational procedures, there is a lot of work to do. We're estimating that it's going to be a 2-year process in order for us to be able to, through the self-reflection period, before we can engage with the APWA. We will, as of January, contact the APWA, get on the list, but then we have to start auditing our own programs to ensure that we're comporting with their best practices. We would anticipate, if all goes well, that we would be coming back with accreditation sometime in 2028.
Is this a yearly program then after that you accredited, or 2 years, or?
It's every 4 or 5 years is reaccreditation. So it's once we establish it, we then are responsible for recording proofs for ensuring that we're following the policies that they identify as required to be considered accredited, similar to CALIA or our police department. So that's the ongoing work, but the heavy lift is first for us to get there.
Once you're accredited, are there any monetary advantages? Like, does insurance go down? Do they recognize it?
No, so it's not like the National Flood Insurance Program. This is more a stamp of approval to assuage the concerns of residents, to say that you're getting an efficient and effective bang for your buck with your public works services.
Okay.
And that can result in increased business activity because businesses
Right.
want to be in places where they can.
You have to do stuff, right? You have to show them things and.
There are hundreds of policies that need to be written. The accreditation book's about yay so thick, Dan and I just went over it
But
the other day.
they review you and stuff, like.
Oh, yeah, this is.
Because I'm an elite lawyer because I gave someone $500 to say I'm an elite lawyer. Like, that's what I don't want to pay for the village. That's all.
The cost is very de minimis. There's very little cost associated with it from us and the APWA. It really is the work of putting the policies together and then showing that you're doing those things that you say you do.
Okay.
And under the
monitoring
CLIA,
it.
they come out, someone will fly out or come out from wherever to sit down and go through the books, much like the CLIA process does for the police department. It's a big deal, and it is a lot of work. But it also provides benchmarks that I think are important when we talk about things like our increase to the water rate in order to provide for a specific ongoing percentage of water main replacement on an annual basis. It's a great program that I think is all positive.
So then, any other questions? Trustee Krueger?
Yep.
Trustee Lang?
Yes.
Trustee Vito?
Yes.
Trustee Papantos?
Yes.
Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
I'm a yes also.
That is all I have, other than to thank Director Smith. This was his first run in the captain's seat. Thank you. And I think you did an excellent job, so well done. And do you want to introduce Kelly?
This is Kelly. She provided breakfast for us today. She's
Good job.
she's our financial services coordinator, and she does a great job.
Best person in the room. Any other questions or comments from board, from staff? I know, what? Oh, Trustee Papantos?
Yeah, I also wanted to thank finance and all of our staff, because keeping our budget at a level isn't just the directors or, this board, it's staff who's working, who's doing more with the same amount of staff over the years. No budget increase makes all of us look really good, but, we have to thank you guys for it, really, and every employee of the village. That makes it really work. And, the programs we have and, seeing problems before they become bigger. So the maintenance and just general upkeep. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lang. Papantos. Mr. Clicker, you gonna make it?
Mr. President? Mr. President?
Unless there, Trustee Krueger?
Two things. Time change? Is that tonight? Okay, so don't forget to do that, and then vote on Tuesday?
That's next week, this coming week.
That's Tuesday. Or early vote, but vote. Try not to set the world back 100 years.
Trustee Lang?
Because I always miss it at our regular meetings. A safety concern out of London School, the exit. There are two do not enter signs at their exit, of course. But on the other side, there's no stop signs. So it's very optional. That's a place where a stop sign should happen. And I think it's on the school to do that, not on the village. Can we suggest to them to put stop signs behind there so people they do stop and don't stop when they feel like it.
Seems logical to me.
Because I've seen traffic cars just roll right out of there. It's a school.
We'll have the traffic sergeant contact the school district, but I believe the responsibility will fall on state because it's a state route, and they would regulate whether then stop signs can be installed on ingresses and egresses onto their state route. But we'll check.
Thank you.
Good to go?
Good to go.
All the business has been conducted and concluded. I am looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Trustee Vito, second.
Second.
Trustee Kruger, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent meeting, everyone. Meeting is
That
adjourned.
was good.